Okay, hi everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 22nd, and we are at SIG Testing's weekly meeting. On the agenda today, I wanted to run through a couple quick things that came up as a result of a discussion on Kubernetes Dev. I wanted to highlight some improvements that Clayton Coleman made to Kubernetes recently, and then I want to hand the rest of the time off to Sun Lu to talk about. Well, first he can teach me how to pronounce Boscos or Buku or Voco or however you pronounce it. First off, real quick, there was a discussion in Kubernetes Dev on the thread that I'm linking in chat here and is in the meeting notes, where somebody suggested the idea of maybe removing implicit self-approval or self-approval. And it sort of mothballed into this much larger discussion about many people having opinions on how the automation should work on this project, including things like maybe we should always have self-approvals, maybe we should never have self-approvals. Why is it that people who aren't in owners files can /LGTM things? We should do that, we shouldn't do that. And maybe we should auto-label PRs that have WIP, maybe we should make those not mergeable. And I think that sort of towards the end there, Eric kind of came in and rightly suggested that folks who are interested in that sort of thing, this is a fantastic place to discuss those kinds of issues. A lot of people here who are familiar with these code bases and work on them actively and daily. So I think maybe everybody who wanted to express an opinion on that stuff has already chimed in on that thread. And thank you, Steve, for sort of taking the initiative to push ahead with, yeah, maybe it is a good idea to pave the cow path of, for pull requests that are works in progress, maybe we should, people sort of naturally put WIP in the pull request title. Why don't we have a bot recognize that and apply a label and not merge those things and do that in a way where that gives control to pull request authors who may not necessarily be organization members, so it kind of empowers people. If we have any other strong opinions on that stuff, we can chat about it briefly here, or we can move on.
Yeah, the only comment I had that I was like, that brought me to actually make some of these changes was just thinking through, like, we ran into, once we deployed the mungers, just some instances where it was easy for developers to make mistakes in working with the program because it wasn't quite clear how it was working. And so I guess just continuing to focus on like making sure that also the decisions are made by asking Kubernetes dev. I understand the point that Eric was trying to make, but I think the intent of asking the community at large is just that, it's something that's going to impact the workflow of everybody. So doesn't, you want that input from everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that was the correct thing to do. Hey, we were thinking about making a change that impacts the workflow of Kubernetes development. Kubernetes dev is absolutely the right place to ask that question. And unfortunately, I think what we got was a bunch of people talking over each other about a variety of subjects. Nobody actually explicitly answered your initial question of, hey, should we turn this on or off? Figuring out how to steer that into an actionable thing is its own thing, but I think we got a couple concrete items, and the next steps are, if you're interested in that, here's the repo to work on this stuff. Please open issues here, and we'll track that in this particular SIG moving forward. In the steering committee parlance of like lazy consensus, I don't think I got lazy consensus on any of the suggestions that were raised in that thread, other than you're actually working on, hey, yeah, it does seem like adding a label for work in progress PRs is a natural evolution. So I'm interested in those things, but I don't want to hijack the rest of this meeting for that. It's just if we have further thoughts, we can follow up on that thread. One real quick thing, like we can totally come back to that if Sen runs out of time. One other really quick thing I wanted to highlight, maybe everybody here already knows about it, but Clayton went back and finally picked up some work that's been sitting out there for a while to add the capability to display standard out and standard error in Kubernetes. So like that example PR that I linked, if you look at that, you'll see that it says, it actually says the tests in the tab here. I guess I could like share my screen so this shows up in the video real quick. Boom. So you can see that Kubernetes now says tests, there are 4 that failed, there are 300 that succeeded. That's really cool. And for this proxy version v1 test that failed, I can click this little link here to see standard error or standard out as relevant to this test. This is all stuff I could have like clicked through to the raw build log and grabbed and found it, but it's like here in one place. And that's just a super awesome, neat, useful improvement that I like jumped up and down when I saw it. So thank you so much, Clayton. Okay. And everybody who actually got this deployed. I'm sure it was a team effort. But I know there's, you know, it's not as easy as just picking up a PR that you wrote back in February and marching forward with it. You kind of have to page a bunch of stuff back in your brain and remember what the problem originally was and what the state of the world is now and whether it still makes sense to solve this problem in this way. And it was just cool to see everybody like push it forward. I'm sure there was some self-interest and mutual alignment of interests, but thanks. Okay. With that, I will hand off to Sen to talk about. Can you tell me how to pronounce it, please? I'm going to stop getting it wrong.
I think the proper pronunciation is like Vasquez, because it's from Google Translate it told me about that. But from the spelling, I feel like it should be Vasquez, so it doesn't matter. I'm not a great Greek speaker, so how do I present? Just share screen.
Cool, we can see that.
Wait. So, okay. This is my original design doc. So, introduce some background. So, the initiative for creating Vasquez is for better managing all our testing projects. We currently have like over 500 different testing projects. The pain point before was whenever you create a new job, you need to create a specific GCP project for it. And GKE needs some specific, like special treatment. And all of that has to be done through like our Google internally. So it really blocked like from open source world to add a new job, or if they want to add a new job, they always have to ask us to like, hey, can you create a project for us? And whenever we delete the jobs, for example, when we don't support like release 1.3, after we deleting all the 1.3 release jobs, we don't delete all the created projects. And we kind of keep creating more projects, but like leaking all the other GCP projects. So I wrote this tool. It's as a general resource management tool that instead of ping a specific GCP project to a Kubernetes E2E CI job, the E2E job will grab a free project from the project pool from Vasquez. And after it's finished running, it has a janitor component will clean up the used project and return, re-add it to the pool for the next job to use. So it adds flexibility to like current usage is for easier project management, but later on, we can have more sync out of more usage for this Vasquez system. So the components of Vasquez include a server that contains a pool of like 400 or 500 GCP projects, and I have a client that can. Let me introduce this way. So a Vasquez can contain a pool of resource object. A resource object is just a generic object. You just give it a name, a type, and from the API calls, you can change its state like from any string you want. For give a example, how it currently works is in prod, say we have multiple EDE jobs. At the beginning of the EDE job, it will ask the Bosco server for a free project and set the state to busy. If you look at the, I guess I can grab a running log. No. It's not started yet. Find the GKE up down. So at the beginning of the run, each job, it will acquire a GKE project from Boscus, and that project is Case Jenkins CD GKE prod. And every run, it will pick up a different project. And while it's running, you need to give the Bosco server a heartbeat to notify that, oh, I am still using this project. And whenever you finish using it, you just return the project back to Bosco server, but set the state to be dirty. And the second component is a janitor. Janitor is always pulling all the dirty projects from the Bosco server and run the internal janitor script. It's similar as the current CI janitor, but that's running once per day, and the Bosco's janitor runs right after the job finishes and cleans up the cluster, cleans up the other resource in the project and return the project back to Bosco's. And the third component deployed is called Reaper. Reaper is responsible for kill any inactive resources. For example, if a job checks out a project, but the prod pod just exploded, the Reaper will find out, say this project is checked out, but it's inactive for like an hour. So I'm going to assume that there's something wrong with the job. So it will return the project back to the server, but mark as dirty. So the janitor will pick it up and recycle the project. I also recently added a graph on the Velodrome. So that marks, so basically this is like the 4 state of all our projects. 1 row for GC project and 1 row for GKE project. Like for GKE, it's pretty stable. We always have like 100-something free project and 70. Like the number of busy project just means currently running jobs. We always like have 70, 80-ish running jobs. The GCE seems has less free projects, and it's easy to monitor. And we can, whenever people adding like more and more jobs, and we find out, oh, we are kind of short on projects, we can just create a couple projects and fill up the project pool. So this I think the main merit is Boscus made it easier for people to creating new jobs, especially from open source. Like if you want to make a specific Kubernetes E2E job, you can just set up the job in the create a job in the prod, add the config.json, and you don't have to worry about like project, like create a specific GCP project for it. Yeah. I think a future roadmap I want to add is later on I want to make. So currently, Boscos has a pool of GCP projects. Later on, we want to make Boscos to manage a pool of GCE or GK clusters. So there can be a like gardener component, just keep spinning up like new clusters, and each ETE job, if it's not care about like cluster lifecycle, it can just check out a fresh cluster rather than a fresh project, and that can eliminate like all the up-down time from a ETE run, and each job, and yeah, it can avoid the flakes in the up-down script, so that the ETE job can focus on the testing itself. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Any questions, like discussions?
This is super cool. I think Murray's got a question in the chat about the design doc. Looks really cool. I couldn't find a link to it. Is there any chance you can put a link to that in Slack?
Yeah, I need to share it externally.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that shortly, like this afternoon.
So, like, I've been watching you work on this over the past couple of months, and it's been really cool to see it like gradually evolve and then get to the point where it was just sort of used, and it wasn't like nobody really noticed, I think, that it started getting used almost everywhere. And then I saw you start like becoming this guy from Monty Python, asking people to like, hey, could you give me your unused projects? I'll add them to the pool and like bring out your dad. And so like now you have this huge pool of Google projects that are named whatever they're named, but they can be used for any job. And so it's been this great way of transparently adding value to make it easier for the whole project. So that's super cool. I just want to say like this looks awesome. Okay, my two questions. First, the Gardener component, the maintaining of like a pool of clusters sounds really cool. Have you looked at, I know Deis had some kind of cluster pool thing for their E2E stuff at some point. I'm guessing you decided to look at the project level first because some clusters create additional Google Cloud resources. How do you feel the Gardener component would fit within that model where like ingress controllers and stuff create additional rules?
I'm not sure about like.
Okay,
was it like ingress control? Because I more feel like I want to make the project. So the gardener just running the existing up-down script. It's only responsible for bring up and tear down or clean up the cluster.
Mm-hmm.
It just spit out the current up-down logic from the current test logic.
Okay, that makes sense. My other question, like graphs are always fun. They tell stories. I noticed around 10 to 11 this morning, you can see that big spike there. I'm guessing that's what happens when Boscos doesn't run, right? Like that dirty went super high.
This morning, yeah, I checked the graph and it turns out the janitor pod cannot contact the service anymore. Like all of a sudden, I simply redeployed it, and that seems like everything back to normal, I need to like look into like maybe to improve the robustness there. But other than that spike, oh, there's another spike for the GCE project around like last week. And that like self-healed itself. I didn't bother looking into that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Like I think these sorts of graphs, I always find them to be super awesome because like you can see the system at work. You can see the stuff that's actually happening. And yeah, I would expect if there was a problem with the janitor or some part of Oscos that yeah, the dirty projects would go up. And then when we fix it, the dirty projects would go down. So
yeah.
You know, just like merge queue is blocked, pending PRs goes up, merge queue is fixed, pending PRs goes down. Metrics and graphs, good. Thank you for making your own dashboard for this stuff.
We might want to add more metrics, like say how many projects are checked out, like overall, like in like the last hour kind of metric. Maybe that's helpful, like to let us know like how often does our job runs. Maybe that can also be a pro metrics as well. But yeah, that's fun to make my first graph on Velodrome, like learning and like plotting it.
I guess one other random question I had, if anybody else has any questions, would be like, so this is all very useful, especially if I wanted to use this on my own. This is really useful if I use Google Compute Engine. What's your feeling like for the level of effort it would take to use this for other clouds or the management of other cloud-specific resources like Azure, AWS, VPCs, or something? Sorry, police.
Yeah, I think it can manage any sort of project. It can be like a Boscus AWS like resource pool. The resource is generic enough. It can even be like some federation tokens or like the talk with Eric. It can be a Dota 2 server, something.
So, something that I would like to eventually, this is Eric, by the way, and something I would be interested in working out at some point in the future is not every cluster necessarily needs to do cube up. So like potentially we could use Boscus to maintain a pool of projects that already have a running cluster. And so when I add a like recent commit on each branch or something, and then so the testing could we could decouple the up-down logic and put those in specific cluster lifecycle jobs. And then, SIG apps could just grab a already running cluster and then run tests, which could potentially, really rapidly increase the, speed for running tests.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely the direction this could head. Like I said, I've seen, I'm not sure where it's at today, but I know that's sort of the model that Deis used when they were end-to-end testing workflows. They'd use, can't think of the name off the top of my head, they'd use some component that would release a cluster out of a pool of GKE clusters, and then using that clean cluster, they would install a whole bunch of Helm charts to set up the Deis workflow paths, and then run end-to-end tests against that, and then when they were done, they would hand it off and put it back into the pool. So it's that sort of model, and like, I'm not sure how actively it's being used or maintained today, but that might be a place to like learn some lessons from.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Would that be useful for pull request testing or just post submits and periodic stuff?
Yeah, so definitely I think the pre-submit Basel job is already using Boscus. So like each run will just grab a project. And the other jobs is not using it because they are still lives in Jenkins. Once we migrate off everything from Jenkins to Prow, then basically the Bosco service is living in the prod cluster, and once we migrate more things off from Jenkins into prod, and more things can use the resource from Boscos. And you can still have the ability to ping a specific project to your job. Like, for example, the GPU tests and scalability tests that requires specific quota, you still want to ping like a custom-made project to your job. We still have the ability to do so.
When you ask for and get a new project, does Boscos deliver you the credentials to add stuff to it?
We have all the projects set up using the same service account. The service account we are using for all the uploading logs and stuff is also has the right role for all the projects in Boscos.
So if you were to make this also lease you a Kubernetes server, you would expect the kubeconfig to exist already before you would just split the context?
So we actually, kubetest already has there's a save flag you can send to kubetest, which will allow you to upload the kubeconfig to a GCS bucket, which you can then download later. So we use that for the soak testing, because once a week we'll deploy the soak cluster, and obviously it runs its tests and then it finishes, and then throughout the week we just reuse that existing cluster. We don't. The whole point of the soak test is to continue using the same cluster. So the next run will then just download the kubeconfig and then run that. Yeah. So that would probably be the way, if I wanted to have a pre-spun cluster, we could do that. Another fun thing, if we had really, if we got really fancy, this would take a ton of work, but we could identify, the challenge with pull requests is we obviously need to deploy a cluster that has your changes in it. But if we could identify that I'm only changing the replica set controller, or the, whatever, the stateful set controller, we could potentially use a pre-existing cluster and then just build that image that runs the stateful set controller, and then reload the stateful set job in the existing cluster, and then run EDE tests. But and Bazel, may help with some of that, but that would be a very challenging thing to identify which components of Kubernetes we need to reload each time we make a pull request.
So as I understand it, also this is not part of the scope right now, but I was thinking about, as a person that might be diagnosing problems with test infrastructure, as you move towards this job that's leasing a cluster, how do you thread through the information to let somebody quickly identify, okay, this job may be failing because the cluster didn't get cleaned up correctly. Let me figure out what ran there before, how the cleanup happened, et cetera, et cetera. Because go ahead. Oh, sorry, that's someone was saying something. Because today with the cube up and cube down, that you have to go look at a different job on your PR to figure out how that staging happened first, right?
Right. I think before, after you spawn up the cluster, there might be we can add some verification check, say, oh, this cluster is healthy enough. It's all the components are functional before it adds itself to the pool that the running job wants to use.
Yeah, I think that's sort of those sort of tricky use cases will require some thought, which I think is why it made sense to start at the the project level where you can kind of, nuke everything from orbit because it's the only way to be sure that you're starting with a completely blank slate. And then we can get into how we pass along log files and stuff and how long we should retain those sorts of things to carry along through a given run. I think maybe another thing to consider in that context might be if you find that a job is failing for whatever reason and it's the sort of long-running job like scalability, although I don't know, maybe like scalability may be taken care of because they're already pinned to a specific project. But the sort of scenario where you have a job that runs and it fails and you want to be able to forensically go in and debug what happened, some way to be able to mark that project or that cluster as something to stick around for a little bit. Anyway, I think we're out of time. Yep, cool. Thanks so much for your time. That was an awesome presentation. Thanks everybody for your time today, and we'll see you all next week. Happy Tuesday.